On behalf of the AFL-CIO, it's an act concerning employment providing for local government control over wages.
Any objection? Seeing none, and is introduced. Any other bill introductions? Seeing none, we will move on to the confirmation hearing on Colonel Michael McCoy. Colonel, you want to come up, do an introduction, and give us your testimony.
Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, appreciate you. First of all, I appreciate everything that you guys do, and I know you're busy, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to conduct this confirmation hearing. It's my pleasure to introduce Colonel Mike McCoy. He's a colleague and also a field artilleryman, which I am as well. So it's my pleasure to introduce him. He is the exact right person for the position of the Deputy Commanding General of the 35th Infantry Division to go in there and get them ready for their upcoming deployment in a couple of years. So exact right person. Mike's a team builder, goes back to his college days where he was a great teammate in the Army football team, and he's continued that great teamwork and team building going forward in his last 30 years of military service. He's a mentor, coach, and teacher. He's done that in a variety of ways, developing leaders within the formation. He's commanded at the battery, battalion, and brigade levels. And ultimately, his last assignment was with the Army, the Kansas Army National Guard. He was the Chief of Staff working for the Assistant Adjutant General. So builder of teams, a great mentor, coach, and teacher. He understands the war fight, and he's the right person to go into the division. And then with the National Guard, we do have 2 missions, so he's also very fluent in that. He served in the domestic advisory response, domestic assistance response team with the division, where they work National Guard, civil support missions across the 54 states and territory, but more specifically looking inward to the citizens of Kansas. So again, thank you for your time, and with that, I'll turn it over to Mike for his testimony. Thank you.
Welcome to committee.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, and those I know I had the opportunity to meet with several of you earlier this week, so thank you for your time on that. Again, thank you for your time today. I'm Colonel Mike McCoy, and I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you for the confirmation of my appointment to Brigadier General in the Kansas National Guard. It's an honor to be here, and I'd like to express my gratitude to Governor Kelly and the Adjutant General, Major General Venerti, for their trust and confidence in my continued service. Also wanted to send my thanks to kind words from General Schneider here. He's been a great mentor and colleague over the last several years. A little bit about myself and my qualifications. I grew up in Abilene, Texas, and began my military service as a cadet at West Point in 1993. I graduated in 1997 and served on active duty for 11 years as a field artillery officer. Active duty career began at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where I served as a fire direction officer, platoon leader, and also got to serve as a battery commander. I was then assigned to the 2nd Infantry Division in Korea, where I again got to serve as a battery commander. And then after Korea, my final active duty tour was again at West Point as a tactical officer and later as the regimental executive officer for the United States Corps of Cadets. Those formative years really laid the foundation for my leadership and military knowledge that which continue to guide me today. In 2008, I transitioned to a civilian career as a senior manager for the Kansas City Southern Railway. And in 2009, I joined the Kansas Guard to continue my service. I was a planner with the 35th Infantry Division there at Leavenworth and was quickly given a full-time opportunity on the Domestic All Hazards Response Team. And that was a national level planning initiative in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. My next assignment, I deployed with the Field Artillery Battalion to the Horn of Africa as the operations officer, and then later served as the executive officer when we returned to Kansas. And then in 2013, I began my active guard reserve career, and that's where I held assignments as a curriculum developer at Fort Leavenworth. I served on the National Guard Joint Staff as a domestic planner, and then I also served as the Deputy Chief of Staff at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Those assignments really gave me valuable insight to national level priorities and operations of large staff organizations. I returned back to Kansas in 2018 and had the privilege of commanding an artillery battalion, and followed by roles as the Director of Plans, Operations, and Training for the Kansas Army National Guard, Brigade Command, and then as the Chief of Staff for the 35th Infantry Division, and later as for the Kansas Army National Guard. These assignments included significant responsibilities, such as leading during COVID operations, capital response, Hurricane Ida, and a challenging exportable combat training center rotation at Camp Guernsey, Wyoming. Throughout all this, I am fortunate to have been supported by my incredible family. My wife, Summer, who couldn't be here today, but she's a nurse at Indian Hills Elementary School, and together we have the proud parents, 4 wonderful children. They all attend Washburn Rural School District here in Topeka. My family, it's my greatest accomplishment, and their unwavering support has been invaluable throughout my service. Over the last 30 years, I've been honored to serve in diverse roles across the United States, Kansas, and abroad. My experience leading soldiers at the battery, battalion, and brigade levels, along with national level assignments, has uniquely prepared me to lead and synchronize large formations in multi-domain and large-scale combat operations. I'm deeply grateful for the opportunities and support I've received throughout my career, and I look forward to continuing my service in the Kansas National Guard. So thank you for your consideration.
All right, committee, are there questions? Senator Clifford.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I enjoyed speaking with you when you came by the office, but could you give the committee some idea of how far-flung the operations are in the position to which you are here today?
Yeah, so Kansas is very fortunate, and again, excuse me if you already know this, but the 35th Infantry Division is really an amazing organization, and its headquarters is here in Kansas at Fort Leavenworth. It's a division headquarters. A division is the unit of action for the Army now. 35th has 7 brigades that are spread out across 6 different states. Approximately 15,000 soldiers that are part of that formation. It is routinely deploys. So they recently, several years ago, returned from the Middle East as the Task Force Spartan headquarters. And they'll be doing that again in 2027. And that's one of the roles that I, will be a part of, is getting ready for that deployment in 2027. But again, a division headquarters is being a relatively small state, having one of 8 National Guard divisions is really really great for Kansas.
Thank you, Colonel McCoy. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Senator Fasquedo.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you for your formal presentation, and I enjoyed our visit too in the office. And but what I wanted to, and I support your appointment. And what I wanted to ask the gentleman that spoke before you got up and who introduced you, he said that you both served in, and I missed that word. He said you both served in some capacity.
Yeah, we're both field artillery officers, so that's our branch. These are the crossed cannons, and so that's, they have various career fields in the Army, infantry, field artillery, armor, signal corps, things like that. So another thing that's interesting about Kansas, it's a very heavy field artillery state. So we have two field artillery brigade level headquarters and 2 battalions, and so a lot of field artillery force structure. We like to say we're a division state with a lot of field artillery. So you won't go far without hitting a field artillery officer in Kansas.
Further questions, committee? Senator Dietrich.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Certainly enjoy you, your family. So if you were to look at all of your leadership qualities that you have gained over the years, I mean, going back and forth to West Point, being a West Point graduate, and then going back and being a part of that faculty. So what do you think some of your greatest leadership qualities are, especially moving forward in this position?
Yeah, so it's evolved over time. I think as when you're more junior, you're dealing with problems that are kind of immediate problems and more small scale problems. What I really learned, especially at the chief of staff level, at the most senior levels, is that there's no easy problems at that point. Because if they were easy, somebody else would have already solved them. So when they get to you, they're complex problems, and really. At that level, you can't solve complex problems by yourself. You have to use the team. You have to know everybody's strengths and weaknesses. You can't treat everybody the same. What you do with some people, the way you treat some people is different with other people. You've got to really know how to read people and know what gets the most out of people. And I think I'm not going to say I'm a master at it, but I've gotten good at it, at least in trying to read people and really getting the most out of people and trying to get the mission accomplished and solving problems. Really, that's the key, is to be a problem solver.
So what do you think will be your greatest challenge in the new position?
So so the deployment coming up, and part of the deployment, there are a couple of really Forces Command, national level exercises that are the lead up to a deployment. A lot of times in the military, in the National Guard specifically, the deployment's actually the easy part. It's getting through all the gates to get you ready to deploy. That's kind of the hard part. So I think that really that preparation phase, getting through the warfighter exercises, those are very challenging. I mean, they're designed to be very hard. But getting all the various pieces together and being successful at a warfighter exercise is really, that's one of the things that's a primary mission of mine.
So, Madam Chair, I'd just like to say I hold him in the highest regard, and whenever you're ready for a motion, I'd make a motion.
Further questions, committee? Senator Stearns.
Not so much a question, but a comment. And I understand the deployment readiness. I live outside of Riley, near Fort Riley, and so the sound of freedom is very much heard in my home as it rattles our walls, but much appreciated. And I expected Senator Dietrich to make sure and point out that your children are going to Washburn Rural.
Yes.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you. And thank you for being here. One of my niece's husband is in the National Guard and has been able to participate in the work in Puerto Rico and now in California. So thank you for your leadership and appreciate all your support for him.
Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Clifford.
Thanks for another chance, Madam Chair. I just want to make a point of order that the sound of freedom actually is made by airplanes. And being a part-time Riley County resident, that booming in the night is just annoying.
Duly noted. Further questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming here. And I will turn to Senator Dietrich.
Madam Chair, I would move that we pass out the nomination of Colonel Mike McCoy to Kansas National Guard Brigadier General favorably for passage.
Seconded by Senator Thomas. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Motion passes, and he is passed out favorably. Thank you very much. Committee, we will now turn our attention to House Bill 2206 for a overview. I will turn to Jason with the Revisor's Office to give us an overview of the bill.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. House Bill 2206 is a campaign finance bill that also gets into some aspects of the Kansas Governmental Ethics Commission. The bill, primarily, the first thing the bill does is change the name of the Kansas Governmental Ethics Commission to the Kansas Public Disclosure Commission. You can see that on page 1 of the bill in section 1, that name change there. There are also a number of amended statutes in the bill, which is most of its length, just making conforming amendments to make that name change wherever it appears in statute. The next set of amendments I'll direct the committee's attention to is in the definitions section for the Campaign Finance Act. This is 25-4143. It adds a new definition on page 6 of the bill of cooperation or consent. This term appears in the aspect of when expenditures are made as independent expenditures and whether or not they are independent expenditures for reporting purposes. The phrase means expenditures that are made at the request or recommendation or with the assent of a candidate or a party committee. That is when the expenditure is made with the cooperation or consent of the candidate or the party committee, as opposed to being a truly independent expenditure that's made without cooperation or consent of the candidate. And so that changes there. And then I will also direct the committee's attention on page 8. The definition of political committee is being amended under the bill. Under current law, the definition means a combination of 2 or more individuals or any organization that has the major purpose of expressly advocating or making contributions or expenditures for the election or defeat of a candidate. The amended definition focuses more on the aggregate contributions or expenditures that are made by this combination of individuals or organization, and that would be triggered at an annual aggregate contribution or expenditure amount of $3,000. So once you hit that, then you become a political committee under that definition. And you also must satisfy that there is explicit documentation that the organization's major purpose is express advocacy for candidates under one element, or that the organization spends at least 50% of its total program spending on contributions or expenditures. And so what the definition now under the bill would be, 1, there's a dollar threshold for your contributions and expenditures. And there's a second element, 2 different ways you could also be qualified as a political committee. One is through express documentation in your organizing documents or in a resolution adopted by your governing body that your major purpose is for express advocacy, or just looking at your total program spending, does a majority of that go towards contributions and expenditures in Kansas on state elections? And so that's the definition proposed under 2206. You also see some additional language within that definition on page 9, specifying how we calculate total program spending for purposes of determining who is a political committee. The next amendment appears on page 11 of the bill. This is in 25-4150 on the reporting threshold for reporting independent expenditures. It's being increased from a $100 limit to a $1,000 limit per year. It also requires that each report include the name and address of each person receiving payment in excess of $500 for an independent expenditure and the date, amount, and purpose of each expenditure. And then finally, the bill amends 25-4154. This amendment appears largely on page 14 of the bill. And this is in the statute that prohibits contributions made in the name of another person. And the new language on page 14 prohibits agreements or any other form of condition or stipulation when you make a contribution, that contribution is then to be paid on to another candidate so as to hide the origin source of that contribution for that ultimate end candidate. Such agreements, conditions, stipulations are declared void under the new provisions there on page 14 and cannot be effective. I will just point out the House Committee on Elections did make one amendment, or a couple amendments with respect to that definition of a political committee. One was to lower that threshold contribution amount from, originally the bill had it at $5,000. The House Committee on Elections lowered it to $3,000. And then they also extended the look-back period for the total program spending to a 5-year look-back as opposed to just a 1-year review of total program spending for that definition. On final action, the bill passed the House of Representatives on a final vote of 74 to 45. These changes would be effective on July 1st if enacted. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for Jason? Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason, on page 14, the language about contributions on behalf of somebody, are you referring to if I'm a single person and I give you a campaign donation, if someone else wants to make a contribution? Just walk me through that. I don't know why.
I believe this is the case where, for instance, I make a contribution to you as a candidate, and then you turn around and make that take that money and give it to somebody else who's a candidate, and therefore me as the original contributor to that candidate is not reported on the reporting requirements because you've made that contribution, you know.
I thought so.
I believe that's the situation. I think the conferee can probably clear that up a little bit better with some more concrete examples than my poor hypotheticals off the top of my head.
Well, hey, it's not hypothetical. You're welcome to donate 2028. I'm just teasing with you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Committee, further questions for Jason? Seeing none, thank you very much, Jason. Our first proponent is Josh Nye. Committee, due to time, I'm going to give, since we have proponent, opponent, and neutral, I'm going to give 8 minutes to each side, and that way we have enough time for questions if need be. No need to use all 8 minutes if you don't feel like it, but.
There's a lot to get through.
Thank you.
Thank you for hearing me. This bill really is a follow-up of the 2023 interim committee, joint interim committee with that I believe Senator Thompson vice-chaired with Representative Proctor. That report is available and linked in my testimony, in which a bipartisan unanimous report from both houses issued finding several laws vague and ambiguous, including the PAC definition, the coordination definition, and giving in the name of another. After that 2023 legislative statement that these 3 particular statutes are vague and ambiguous and need to be updated, we've actually had case law on 2 of 3 of those come down, wherein the state PAC definition in January of this year was ruled unconstitutional by Judge Crabtree in Federal District Court. That was a case that I was involved in on behalf of my client Fresh Vision OP. We also were in Shawnee County District Court with respect to the giving in the name of another statute, in which Judge Watson in Shawnee County District Court struck that down, and we were awarded $85,000 in attorney's fees. Attorney's fees are pending in the federal case as well. And so, like I said in the previous committee I was just in, the legislature does the Kansas governmental ethics no favors when it sends it unconstitutional statutes to enforce. And so these particular fixes to the PAC law and to the coordination, or how we phrase it in our statutes, is with cooperation and consent of the candidate. But really that's known at the federal level in 50 states as coordination. We're updating that to include several federal safe harbors that have been long-standing recognitions of exceptions to coordination. For example, when you have a firewall, when you have a common vendor, what do you need to do to avoid coordination, that type of deal. And then finally, the giving in the name of another. With respect to giving in the name of another, this has obviously been in the news for about 3 years, and I think a lot of people around this building are familiar with the investigation that has been in court. A lot of that investigation has wound down as of a couple Fridays ago. But specifically on giving a name of another, the issue was whether this particular statute as written includes a legislative intent to prohibit earmarking. The classic example from case law for giving a name of another is if as an employer, I tell all my employees to give to the candidate of my choice, so I can do 500, 500, 500 for House members, and then after the election, I reimburse them through a bonus for giving. That keeps my name off of the report. It's a transparency issue. What the theory that came into Shawnee County District Court was whether those words giving in the name of another could include a person that files a report can give to B with the understanding that B gives to C. This idea that we're now going to outlaw suggestion or political advice or something like that. You may well decide that you want to regulate earmarking. My contention is that you need to do that very clearly in a separate earmarking statute. And the issue here that Judge Watson ultimately found unconstitutional was trying to kind of bootleg in this earmarking theory into these 9 words that come from, broad words that come from the 1970s statute. And so that's where I think you all have some work to do in updating these 3 definitions. With respect to the name change, that came out of the interim committee as well. The basic idea is just the stigma that comes with every time that you're late filing your campaign finance report, you're now unethical. And that really can have a chilling effect not only on free speech, but also on reputational damage. You're as a candidate, or even someone who may decide I don't want to be a candidate now that I'm going to have attack ads calling me unethical. Interestingly, when I was writing this bill, some of this bill, I found the maybe that currently renames, it's current law, it renames the Governmental Ethics Commission in 1990 to maybe the 80s, to the Kansas Public Disclosure Commission. So that's current law. It just hasn't been the reviser. I don't know if Jason can inform the history on that or something like that. So your predecessors have already done this for you. Legislative research, sorry, not reviser. I'm getting myself in trouble with everybody today. So the point is, they've already done it, it just didn't get updated. I think it's a good change. I think Public Disclosure Commission, I didn't pull it out of thin air, it's in current statute. And that would more reflect the goal of the agency, which is transparency and not prohibition. The last thing I would say is that since we're late in session, I'd ask you to review the last 2 pages of my testimony where I encourage you to consider Senate Bill 279 to amend some of those in. I'm happy to stand for questions on what that does. Unlike 2023, wherein I just kind of dropped a comprehensive bill of substantive changes, procedural changes all over, and it started in the House, and the Senate really didn't get a chance to debate it. It was just a concur on the floor, and there was some frustration about that. The approach this session was to break it up, have some House bills, have some Senate bills. We've kind of spread it out. We just had a hearing in local government on 2 of the governmental ethics bills that were part of this package. 279 is kind of the leftover good government cleanup that I think, and I have shared it with governmental ethics, and we've kind of looked at some of it together. I would encourage you to consider some of those things, and I'd be happy to stand for questions on that. But I know I'm probably getting close to my 8 minutes.
All right, 6 minutes and 26 seconds. Thank you. Committee questions for Josh. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. So when I first read the words Kansas Public Disclosure Commission, I thought that, yes, that could be campaign contributions, but it's public disclosure. Is that where people would look to find out what the school board has paid for wanting to know in terms of agencies, how they spent their budgets? So public disclosure to me seems a little broader in some ways and not focusing. So I'm not sure ethics is the best, but did you come up with any other ideas?
I think I put in there other ones. Commission on Governmental Standards and Conduct was the previous one. Kansas Public Disclosure Commission was the next one. Then they changed it to Kansas Governmental Ethics Commission and then back to Kansas Public Disclosure Commission, but didn't update every other statute. And so the reason where ethics comes from is Chapter 46. That's your gift and lobbying type regulations. The problem with saying this little tiny pool of people who actually hold office that can't take gifts, that can't take, they have to report, lobbyists have to report, et cetera, statements of substantial interest, is you've got that small group of people that ethics applies to, and then every other person that wants to engage in free speech in Kansas is now potentially unethical if I do my donation wrong, or if I do my report wrong. It catches this huge pool of people that's now, what's the Incredibles line? If everybody's special, nobody's special. If everybody's unethical, then nobody's unethical, So.
Can you repeat the one again that was this included standards?
Yeah, the first one was Kansas Commission on Governmental Standards and Conduct.
Thank you.
Further questions for Josh? Seeing none, thank you very much, Josh. Committee noticed that we also have written-only testimony as well. It is in your S drive. Anybody else here wishing to be a proponent? Seeing none, we will open up the opponent testimony. We have one in-person opponent. Again, 8 minutes, and we have Charlotte O'Hare. Welcome to committee.
Thank you. And I won't be taking up the 8 minutes, so you can breathe a sigh of relief. I'm here really talking more globally than on specifics in this piece of legislation because of the cloud that has been over some of the leadership in the Republican Party and other organizations on an ongoing investigation. I just think that it's damaging to the process to be changing rules that are in place under this investigation. I wrote a column on this in March 4th after the reorganization meeting in Goodland, and I beat up on my friends pretty severely, but I just want to emphasize that it's not just the Republicans that have the acrobats of campaign finance. It's also the Democrats, and I have an example. As I understand, there is a prohibition of PACs coordinating with campaigns, not just PACs, but state committees, et cetera, that there cannot be coordination. But according to campaign finance reports, Danielle Robinson was hired as a political consultant for Julie Brewer's campaign, who ran against me for my reelection in Johnson County on the commission. She was also at the same time the chair and treasurer of Amber Waves, who gave Mrs. Brewer $500, plus then Amber Waves expended. I put approximately $40,000 in. The testimony is actually $35,041.06. And actually on the campaign report, it says that it was for Julie Brewer's. So that, anyway, I just want to let you understand that there are, is this against the ethics statutes that we have in place? I don't know, but this is what is happening on the ground. So it's not just the Republicans, it's also the Democrats. Now, do I think that we need campaign finance reform in Kansas? Yes, we do. But I think that we need to let the dust settle on this current investigation and not muddy the waters. And my friend Josh has just stated that the investigation is winding down as of 2 weeks ago. And perhaps this will get settled and that we can have a clean slate and go forward. So I'm just asking that you consider cool your heels, let this process go forward, because currently it stinks to high heaven to be changing your ethics and campaign finance laws while there is an ongoing investigation. And that's just what I wanted to come up and share with you. That's it. And I do have, I'm sorry that I did not put links to these two documents showing the contributions of Amber Waves to Mrs. Brewer and, oh, thank you. And then also the contributions or the expenditures for the various campaigns. And if you want those, I can give it to you.
Thank you. If you would like to email those to our committee assistant, that would be great.
Okay.
Committee questions for Charlotte. Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not specifically for Charlotte, but for Jason. So if there is an ongoing investigation, wouldn't that still be subject to the current law, even if we were to change the law for 2025? Effective, let's say, July 1 of 2025, the investigation would still be subject to whatever the law was during that time. Is that right, or do I have that wrong?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, any investigation into violations of the statute would be based on the statute as it was in effect at the time of the violation.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further questions? Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Jason, along those lines, if this were to pass, this would become law, I believe, in July, right?
Madam Chair, that is correct.
Okay. So if there's pending litigation that's wrapping up, that would probably be wrapped up before this even became law, hopefully. Thank you,
Further
Madam Chair.
questions? Senator Francisco.
Thank you. Can you predict when that might be wrapped up, and could we consider another date for the bill to go into effectiveness, say January 1st, 2026?
Are you asking me?
Or Josh? I mean, I like the idea of waiting if there is litigation going on, but we might want to, I mean, I'm wondering if January 1st, you would think that that might be settled.
I guess that would be a better solution instead of it's really optics and the trust of the people in Kansas. And believe you me, I just finished a 9-day travel around Kansas talking to folks, and people are talking about this, and it undermines the trust of the people in the process. That is one of the huge issues. And whether you extend this and that complies better with law, I'm not sure that really answers the question of transparency for the folks out in all of the state of Kansas that are looking at this going, what in the world is going on? I think I think transparency into the process is one of the big stumbling blocks. But you know, it would be in my opinion, January 1st would be better than in July. But that's just my opinion.
Senator Francisco, maybe that's a good question for the ethics. I doubt they can comment on it, but on when a date will be done. But I think that'd be a good question when they are up for neutral testimony. Do you have another question?
Yes. So do you think the results of that litigation might influence what we should be doing in the future in terms of?
Well, that's absolutely possible. But I'm going to tell you my opinion on future campaign finance overhaul. You need to study what Nebraska, Iowa, Indiana, Virginia, Texas, Alaska, Alabama, and I'm missing a few. They actually do not limit contributions to individual candidates. There is more on reporting and transparency. And now there's varying restrictions on other, political parties, PACs, and this, that, and the other. But I think that you need to study what what other states are doing. And I do have a concern when you do limit contributions. This is just from a philosophical point of view, that when you do limit the contributions, that you are impeding free speech. But the other thing is that with all of the campaign finance requirements in Kansas, it's really you're playing whack-a-mole. You're going, okay, we're going to limit money here, but we're going to let money come in here, but then we're going to limit money there. I mean, it's just, you whack them here, and then it comes up someplace else. It's like money's going to be in the process, and transparency is the goal. So that's my 2 cents worth. That might be a nickel's worth.
All right, final question is to Senator Thomas.
I think just to kind of follow up on what we're talking about here, I think if we wait and say we're not going to take any action until we determine how the court sees this, I almost think that would look worse, that we're changing laws after an immediate court case. If we change it now in an effort of full transparency, and we're able to tell constituents and people, this has no bearing on any of these pending cases, because as we were just told, it's based off the law at that time that the court case started. So I don't think changing a date does any good. I think, just thinking out loud respectfully, it might do more harm. Like, this law goes into effect as soon as this court case is over. If we do this now and at least get it on the books, and again, it has no impact on the current case. We know that. So I think part of the frustration you may be hearing from people, maybe we just need to make sure they understand this has no bearing on any pending court cases, and that, I think, might change the opinion. Just my thoughts. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Charlotte, for being here.
Thank you.
Keep committee notice that there is written-only testimony as well. We are now going to open up to neutral testimony, and we have Caitlin Bowles-Stewart with the Kansas Governmental Ethics Committee here. Welcome to committee. You also have 8 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the committee, for hearing me out today. So the Commission has been neutral regarding House Bill 2206 and has been adopting a neutral approach to legislation just to allow you all to make the policy choice and just explain the different possible enforcement implications to help guide your decision making. So my testimony has largely been framed based on the amendments that came out of House elections. Mr. Nye has spoken with myself, and we've kind of worked on resolving some of the enforcement issues highlighted in House elections that have been reflected in the amendments. So I'll mention some of that as I go through my testimony, but I will largely just be I'll keep it as succinct as I can because you have my written testimony. So regarding House Bill 2206, the first matter I wanted to bring to your attention relates to the definition of cooperation or consent, or as we usually call it colloquially, coordination. And a lot of, speaking with Mr. Nye, we have, I think, come to the same agreement that as written right now, House Bill 2206 does not address agents of campaigns, of candidates, and the definition of agency was added back in April of 2023 in House Bill 2391. And I believe the intention of adding that definition of agent was to account for cooperation or consent, because if a candidate has a consultant or something that's working as an agent for them, they could work around the cooperation or consent prohibition by just having their agent do everything on their behalf. And so adding agent in to the bill would help resolve some of these enforcement concerns that they would just use proxies to exceed contribution limits instead of engaging in independent expenditures by political committees. The second aspect of 2206 is the political committee definition, which some of the concerns the commission had previously was that the $5,000 initial threshold was pretty high for Kansas and would cut out a lot of the political committees that are currently registering. So that threshold level was lower to 3,000, which resolves some of that enforcement discrepancy of political committees operating without disclosure. And the only concern that I particularly have with the definition of political committee that we've not entirely resolved yet is the definition of total program spending, which is under the new bill, to be a political committee, you have to spend on express advocacy over $3,000 and then also meet either your governing documents state that you're created to expressly advocate or for the major purpose of electing a clearly identified candidate or advocating for, or the political committee must have over 50% of their expenditures and contributions of their total program spending be used for express advocacy. And in the previous version of the bill, the total program spending was only calculated on a 12-month time period, which meant that if you get to December 1st of that year and you look at your entity's spending and you're getting close to that 50% mark, you can just move money around affiliated entities so that you're not close to 50 or 51%. So the look back is now 5 years to calculate total program spending or the life of the entity, which resolves some of those enforcement concerns because it's not as gameable. But those concerns are still there. So I would just ask that you all closely look at that definition of total program spending. The final significant concern that I've had that has been discussed somewhat by both the revisor's office and by some of the proponents is related to 2206's changes to giving in the name of another, which is on page 14 of the bill. The giving in the name of another prohibition, a couple of examples have been given. Mr. Nye gave the reimbursement scheme. Jason gave the example of basically using a straw donor, which is actually a really good hypothetical. It's one of the most of person A, you should be proud, that was a great example. Person A gives to person B, and it's like if I were to give you a present and I give it to a friend and I say, hey, can you give X other friend this present? And they give it to them and say, actually, this is for me. Thanks, it's for me, it's not from the original donor. And so that's a very elementary kind of example of that kind of scheme. There are also straw donor schemes where business entities could be used as well, of using shell entities that are not reporting their contributions, and they are persons under the Act that should technically report. So there are various instances of concerns with pass-through schemes, and my testimony highlights a concern that was raised in House elections last month by the Ohio Secretary of State, which related to concerns with foreign entities becoming involved in elections and basically engaging in complex financial transactions so that, yes, the contributions are on campaign finance reports somewhere, but because the foreign entity uses shell corporations or shell donors to funnel funds through, the public is not put on notice as to who the original donor was, that it was a foreign corporation or whatever individual that it was that had the initial contribution. And so the concern with the changes on page 14 is that it states that if a contribution is reported somewhere on a campaign finance report, that there is no giving in the name of another. And the concern here, again, is that if the original source is not apparent to the public, there is a risk that the disclosure interests that the commission was tasked with upholding are not being met, and that the prohibition essentially has no teeth in that world. And so this is a concern. Again, it may be a drafting issue. There may be a way that language could be tweaked. But as the language is written now, it states that if it is on a campaign finance report, it is not a violation of that section. The other thing I wanted to again, reiterate, as has been kind of mentioned by some of the other folks here today, is that this shouldn't be rushed. These are large changes to the Campaign Finance Act. And now, granted, the legislature may be interested in changing it more frequently, but it hasn't been touched in a while. And I would just express caution in some of the language that's used. I also briefly wanted to touch on, before I get questions, on the name change. The commission as a whole, some of the commissioners expressed concerns that it is misleading, that people do contact us for ethics concerns regularly, and I will say, outside of elections, the primary inquiries we get are conflict of interest inquiries of, can I give a gift to this person, or local level, can I accept this gift? And so And another alternative, if you're thinking of different names, some states use Fair Political Practices Commission. That's another, just throwing that word out there, that name. But other states use ethics commissions primarily. That's what's common. I think that KLRD's report showed that as well. But with that said, I'm happy to stand open for questions.
Perfect. Thank you. 7 minutes and 43 seconds. Senator Gossage.
Impressive. Quick question. So, forgive my ignorance. So the Ethics Commission currently deals with finance or campaign finance ethics, correct?
No. So
All ethics.
the ethics, well, so the commission is in charge of Chapter 25, which is campaign finance, local and statewide and all that. And then it also deals with Chapter 46, which is the state conflict of interest laws and lobbying registration requirements. So Chapter 46, yes, deals with legislators and those gifts, but it also deals with all gifts to executive branch employees. And Kansas has a large amount of executive branch employees across the state. And that jurisdiction is with the commission. And the commission also doesn't enforce the local level conflict of interest rules, but it is the source for advisory opinions. And if county attorneys need guidance, they call the commission for guidance on those local level rules.
Thank you. Oh, wait, one last thing, if I may. So I know that you're neutral on the bill, but can you give us any feel for the term Kansas Public Disclosure Commission?
As I mentioned, the commission itself is not, if the name is changed, it's not going to impact the enforcement capabilities of the commission. But as often we will get calls of folks don't know who else in government to call, and they see ethics in our name and they call us, and we will help get them to the right place as best we can. I mean, I've had individuals call me with concerns about lead paint. That is not us, but they don't know who else to call. And so our staff is very good about being patient and getting folks where they need to go. And sometimes we are the only agency who will answer. And other agencies are very busy, but sometimes we're the only person they know to call.
Further questions? Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Something you didn't address that I would be concerned about if I were you guys. With the name change, what would be the cost to your agency to replace all the coffee mugs and the KEC T-shirts? Do you know?
So I spoke with the former executive director about this. They've gone through the name change before. It would be de minimis cost to the agency. It may be tedious, but it would not be a significant cost to the agency to change the name.
I just know bumper stickers are getting expensive, so I just want to make sure we take into account,
Very fair. Yes. No, we're all good on that.
Further questions? All right. Thank you very much for being here. Anyone else here to wish to testify as a neutral? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2206. Committee tomorrow, we have 2 bill hearings, Senate Bill 258 and Senate Bill 234. So please come prepared. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.